Thank you all so much for joining us. This is the SheJumps Backcountry 101. So hopefully this is where you're meant to be. If not, we're happy to have you, so stick around. Our presenting partner tonight is Gaia GPS. They're an awesome mapping app to have on your phone to help with all your outdoor adventures. Tonight, we're gonna give you we're gonna give you an introduction of earning your turns and basically making the transition from resort to backcountry and how that all gets going. This is brought to you by SheJumps, Weston, and San Juan Expeditions. So we've got 3 hosts for you tonight. First, myself, my name is Sarah, and I'm currently the Wyoming Regional Coordinator for SheJumps. For a quick background, I currently live in Driggs, Idaho. I've been backcountry skiing for about 10 years. I've taken my level 1, level 2, and I have a bachelor's degree in snow mechanics, which is kind of fun. But I just love playing in the mountains, and skiing is my jam. So I'm excited to share some knowledge with you. And then I'll pass it over to Ellie.
Hey guys, I'm Ellie. I'm with Weston Backcountry. We're a backcountry brand based out of Minturn, Colorado, which I'll talk about a little bit more in the future slides. I've been snowboarding for, let's see, I don't want to tell you how old I am, but about 25 years, and doing backcountry for the last, I would say about 7 or 8 seasons. I absolutely love it. I really appreciate the fact that it's almost always a powder day out there, and it just feels better when you have to work for those turns, and also just get the physicality out of it. So I really love getting to share these presentations with you guys, especially these women-specific presentations. We really catered this to a female audience, and how that might be a little bit more different than getting out, as a male. So I really hope you guys enjoy this. We love doing these, and I hope you love hearing about it.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah McGregor. I go by Sarah Mack, and I am on the Weston Guide team. I have lived in Colorado my whole life, and I've most recently been transplanted to Winter Park, Colorado, from Gunnison. So I've been a guide and educator for about 13 years. I am an ARI avalanche educator and am an American Mountain Guides Association trained mountain guide in the rock, alpine, and splitboard disciplines. Right now, as far as I know, I'm the only female splitboard guide in my state with AMGA training, and I really want to go out of my way to change that by elevating all of the women around me in this sport and all of the other awesome ways of exploring the outdoors, by doing like women's programs like this and events like the ones that I'm going to talk to you about later. In addition, I'm able to complement my career as a guide and educator, working on the course staff at ARI, the American Institute for Avalanche Research and Education, as their member services manager. So I'm really excited to be here with you all, and I'm looking forward to sharing one of my favorite things of all time with you.
Yeah, so as you can see, you've got an experienced panel up here. So always feel free to ask questions too as we're going. If you want to type it in the chat at any time, go for it, and we may respond to you, or if we think it's something that would be really valuable to the group, we're going to hold off and we will answer it at the end. But I just want to let you guys know, feel free to pop anything in the chat at any time. And with that, I'm going to give you a quick SheJumps intro. I don't know, some of you, maybe this is your first event with us. Maybe you've been to 50. No matter what your experience is, we're super happy to have you here tonight. At SheJumps, we're all about increasing the participation of women and girls in the outdoors and giving them the confidence and leadership and connection to nature that they can find through those experiences. And this is a great quote from one of our board members who's a really good wordsmith. So I'd encourage you to read it. But basically, it's just, we've all found this awesome experience through nature and through connecting with other ladies in the nature. And we want to extend that to everyone. And we do that through providing free and low cost education to women. And not only do those experiences allow us to like grow in an education sense, but it's also kind of therapy, you know, like especially this last year with COVID, I guess that's not even a year, like 2 years of COVID. A lot of people's normal outlets or maybe like social gatherings that they were going to weren't really an option anymore. And having that ability to still go play outside has been crucial. So we want to like help everyone make that connection and like discover that outlet and be able to grow from that. And with everything we do, and the big reason of why we're doing this presentation is safety first. We want everyone to be safe and have the tools they need to go and play outside and come home at the end of the day, because that's what's most important. So with that, we're going to dive into this presentation of some tips and tricks that'll help you get into the backcountry.
Okay, so we just heard about SheJumps and who they are as an organization, and now I'm just going to quickly go through who we are at Weston. So we are, of course, a backcountry ski and snowboard brand, but more than a brand, we're really just a community, and kind of just a community of misfits. We are all backcountry skiers and snowboarders at Weston. We firmly believe, even though the quote is no friends on a powder day, we are all friends on a powder day. Everybody is your friend on a powder day. We truly love being out there. We love connecting with nature, and we will always put our money where our mouth is. So with that, we support a lot of organizations that are near and dear to our heart. So 1% for the Planet, National Forest Foundation, ARI, of course, but then also some women-specific organizations like Backcountry Babes, SheJumps, and just encouraging people to get out off the resort and into the backcountry. We do make skis and snowboards for both resort and backcountry, and award-winning, I should add. But it's really just about like building this whole community of people and sharing our pleasure with each other. Okay, next slide. Awesome. That's you, Sarah Mack. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, I'm here. I'm with it. I got this. So I work for San Juan Expeditions. It's a guiding service based in Silverton, Colorado. Their winter operation is based in Silverton, Colorado. We do backcountry ski, ice, rock, and avalanche education. We're the only locally based ski and mountain guide service in the area. All of our guides have AMGA training or are AMGA certified guides. We run area courses, hut trips, intro to backcountry courses, mountaineering camps, and guided mentorship days. Most importantly, or what I'm most excited about, are the women's trips that we run. And we'll actually talk a little bit about those at the end of the presentation.
Awesome. Okay, so really quick, just the rundown of what we're going to cover tonight. This is going to be kind of a two-parter, so we'll have a little intermission if you guys need to get a drink or a snack or go to the bathroom or let your dog out or whatever. But so for part one, we're going to start with the fundamentals about like, what is backcountry? What does that mean? And what all is it? Does it encompass? Then we're going to go through the gear selection, because obviously there is a big difference between just riding at the resort and having a nice day versus all the stuff that you might have to carry with you on your back when you're in the backcountry, and how to choose the right gear that's really tailored for you and your body and your interest. And then finally, we'll go through that packing list, and then we'll take our intermission and come back, and then we're going to focus on more of the educational side of the backcountry. So how to get started, building that community, how what steps you need to take in order to get your avalanche education, because obviously that's a really important part of getting out there. First aid, some necessary things that you're going to want to either sign up for or keep in mind. Trip planning resources. How are you going to get out there? Like how do you know where to go and what zones, and how to choose backcountry partners, and then community connection. So that we'll go over some events that may be coming up and how to find those things in your area, and how to find other people to go out with. And that'll be the gist of it. We're going to try to move along pretty quickly. So again, if you can save your questions, or excuse me, if you have a question, feel free to enter it in the chat, and whichever of us are not speaking, we'll try to answer those questions kind of in real time. But if it's a really good question, we'll save it and bring it up at the end so that everybody can listen to it. And then once we're done, if you want to stay and hang out a little bit longer, we're happy to linger as well and answer any other questions that you have for us one-on-one. So that's it. Okay, so we did a little poll at the beginning asking you guys to sort of say your name and where you're from, and how many have backcountry experience. Looking through the chat, it looks like people have either like no backcountry or very little backcountry experience, which is perfect. I mean, you guys are the target audience, of course. So this is like the perfect course for you because, you know, maybe you've gone out once or twice or dabbled or haven't gone out at all, and just kind of need to know where to get started. So this is exactly what we'll be talking about tonight. Go ahead, next slide. So why backcountry is a great question. Just kind of a little rundown of the list here: powder exploration, friendship, fitness, rescue, extended seasons, which is awesome. In the times of COVID, backcountry is going to be your friend. We've obviously seen a huge boom in people getting out into the backcountry, I think across all the different parts of the US and I would say everywhere worldwide where there's snow. People don't want to go to the resorts. They don't want to stand in lines and have to make reservations at resorts just to be able to get out. So getting out into the backcountry, you know, you don't have those lift lines. You don't have to make a reservation to get out there. No more snowshoes. That's a huge one. I don't know about you, but I spent my first season in the backcountry with a solid board on my back and hiking in snowshoes. It only took one season of doing that before I bought my first splitboard setup, because that was hard. It was not the funnest thing to do. And so it's really nice to be able to get on those touring skis or onto a splitboard and make that a lot easier and more fun. Summit views, obviously, I mean, look at the picture in this background, it's gorgeous. High fives, and like I said, no lift lines, very much a bonus. So this is I want to say this was taken at Vail. Am I correct, you guys?
I'm pretty sure you're right. Yeah.
Yeah, this was a couple of years ago, lift line at Vail. I don't know, does this look fun to you? Because I cannot imagine. I don't even, usually the lift line looks worse than it is, but I'm pretty sure this was still a nightmare. So obviously going into the backcountry, you're never going to see a line like that. All right, next slide.
All right, so with that, we're going to start diving into the backcountry basics. Obviously, you know, we want to figure out how to make the transition from the resort to the backcountry. That's where we've got AT skis and splitboards, which are specialized pieces of equipment that allow us to travel uphill through snowy conditions to desired zones, so we can have a great time skiing or boarding downhill. There's two main parts of it. There's tour mode and ride mode. Tour mode is when you're going uphill with your AT or splitboard bindings, free heel bindings, and you've got skins on the bottom of whatever device you have and poles, and similar motion to cross-country skiing almost. And then ride mode, which is what you're already all doing at the resort. It's downhill travel using your skis or your splitboard connected to one full board and having an awesome time going downhill, which I think you all are probably fairly familiar with if you're here. So with that, like, the first thing to know is, how do you choose your first setup? There's different things that you look for when you're looking for touring gear versus resort gear, and it can be overwhelming at first, and we want to help you all have like a little bit of knowledge, so when you go to a shop, your local shop, you kind of know what you're looking for. You're not fully just relying on the person who's there. Like, you can speak up for yourself, you can say what's important to you and make sure you get the right gear. So we're going to start with skis. And with skiing, there's basically three types of tourers. There's uphill focused, and that's someone who's just, and this actually kind of applies to both skiing and splitboarding, but there's uphill focused. Those are people that are just stoked to get a ton of vert, go far, travel fast, and like, and a good workout, all that. Like, they're focused on the uphill portion of it. And then there's the flip side, downhill focus. Those are people that really just they're going up, but only because they want to go down again and have that endless powder and those experiences you can't get at the resort. And then the all-arounder is just like the mix of the two. You're happy on the uphill, but also stoked on the downhill. You'll probably do some like shorter pass laps, you know, to get lots of runs in. But then you also want to have that ability to go on longer spring missions or hut trips or things like that. So I think the first thing is like figure out where you kind of fall in that scale, or yeah. And then once you've discovered that, you start looking at your skis. These are a few questions that you can kind of ask yourself and know ahead of time so you know what you're looking for. First, where will you be skiing them? You're going to be skiing a lot of like open bowls. You're going to be skiing a lot of trees. Just think of the general places where you envision yourself skiing. And then how will you be using them? Again, is it more of a mode of travel to get far into the backcountry for these like really long days or multi-day trips? Or is it more of a mode of play and you want to have fun and ski a ton and do all that? Also ask yourself, do you want something that works for at both the backcountry, in the backcountry and at the resort? Because that could change kind of what you're looking for. Or you want a pure backcountry setup. And then also think about like what your strengths and weaknesses are as a skier or an athlete. And what I mean by that is, so as an example of myself, I would consider myself pretty like all arounder, love going down, but I'm also like stoked for the hut trip, the long spring missions, all that. And when I think of myself as like strengths and weaknesses, I've been skiing since I was about like 3. So I feel pretty confident in my skiing ability. And at the same time, even though like I mountain bike in the winter, I trail run like through, well, not trail, but I run through the winter. No matter what, every time I go out with my husband, he seems to just like beat me on the uphill. And so I feel like that's like my weakness is the uphill. So when I look at for a ski, I'm looking for a ski that will maybe give me like a slight advantage on the uphill, because I know on the downhill, I like have the ability to control it a little bit more, or I can like make up for what I might be losing by getting a slightly more uphill focused ski. So that's kind of like a lot. Those are things to think about when you are starting to envision what your first setup will be. And things to consider with a lot of this is similar to like what you're looking for in your resort ski, but with obviously the skinnier it is, it'll be lighter. So that'll help you go uphill and it'll be quicker, which kind of is why uphill focus has like a shorter width. And this is the under the foot width. So like 70 to 90 millimeters is kind of what to shoot for if you're more stoked on going uphill and just want to be able to go uphill fast. On the flip side, free rider is if you're just want like some awesome boats to powder ski on, but they'll be obviously a little bit heavier. That's generally like the 95 to 115 or more millimeter underfoot width. And then a good all around can be like 90 to 100 or even like 105. That's going to be still like light on the uphill, but you'll have a little more control on the way down. So those are important things to think about. And then other things, length, pretty similar to your resort skis. If anything, you could maybe go a little bit shorter. And it depends on so many other things as well. We're not going to dive into that, but stick with about what you're already skiing. Material, typically there's a ton of touring backcountry focused skis that are way lighter than your typical resort ski. They've started using like carbon fiber, poplar, bamboo, all sorts of different things to make your ski a little bit lighter, which helps on the uphill again, but it does make it therefore lighter on the downhill. So it's a little bit more likely to you can kind of get bumped around. Like in powder, it's going to be great, but when you get in kind of choppy conditions, that the savings of weight will kind of make it a little bit harder to control on the way downhill. So it's just another thing to think about. In shape, there's so many shapes of skis these days. I don't even think I know them all, but got like camber, rocker, full camber, hybrid models, all that. It's pretty much the same as your resort ski. Like whatever applies to your resort ski going down is going to be the same when you're in the tour backcountry going down. The one thing that will be different is now you're also using it to go up. So I'm not going to go into like all the geometry and everything of the shapes, but basically one thing to remember is for uphill, the amount of surface area that your skis are actually touching the ground, that's going to help with your like grip going up. So a shape that has more surface area will be more beneficial on the uphill than a shape that has less contact points. So that's everything to think about. And then here we've got two Weston skis this year, which is the Summit and the Grizzly, and I'm obsessed with the graphics on both of them. Another thing to look for is top sheet, but don't make your decision off of that, although that does maybe like start my decision making sometimes. But these are both great skis. The Summit would kind of be the better option for if you consider yourself an all-arounder. It's like your everyday backcountry all mountain, do everything ski, and it's beautiful. And then the Grizzly is like your fat powder day ski. So they're super fun when you've got a lot of snow on the ground. And then that leads us to bindings and boots. There's two main types. We've got frame binding and tech binding. And so a frame binding is going to be pretty similar to your resort binding in terms of like its sturdiness and heftiness, but the difference is that basically the whole plate of what the binding is on, you can release the heel so you're walking in it, and that's, I'm pretty sure that's what these ones are in this picture. And then your tech binding is going to be lighter weight, and it'll be, people are concerned about compromising like how much control you have when you go to tech bindings, because you do get lighter, so it's just not as sturdy as a frame binding. Although every year these are getting better and better, so they're pretty solid as well. So when you're making the decision, things to consider. The first thing that I don't even have on there is cost. There's definitely a cost difference between the two. Frame bindings are typically a little bit cheaper than tech bindings, so they can be a great like starting point. That's what I started on when I started skiing. Think of like what type of skier you are. Are you, when you go in the backcountry, are you going to want to like throw a ton of tricks or like drop cliffs and stuff like that? If that's the case, like frame bindings might be a little more advantageous to you because you're just way less likely to pop out. But I say that, and I've rarely popped out of my tech bindings as well. Think about what type of tours you're going to do and where. Again, like the lighter is going to be better for going further, which is your tech binding. Frame bindings, you can definitely go far in them, but it's a slog. And then if it's something, do you want to use these at the resort or just in the backcountry again? The main thing really is you need to make sure your skis and boots work together. So I'm going to get into the boots just here, right here. But like your resort boot will most likely work in a frame binding, but it probably won't work in a tech binding, which can kind of again add to the cost factor. Like I think frame bindings are a great place to start because you can use the boots you already have and you're ready to go, whereas there's just a little bit more of an investment to get fully into the tech setup. And then again, DIN settings, I kind of mentioned that earlier, but that's basically frame bindings have a higher DIN, can typically go up to a higher DIN setting than tech bindings. And one other thing to consider is brakes. I think they're a great thing to have. Some of the tech bindings have dropped them off just because they're super focused on being really lightweight. So just something to think about if you go to buy those tech bindings, like are brakes included or can you add brakes if needed? Because I think that's pretty clutch. And then so boots, resort and touring boots. The difference is, so touring specific boots will have a walk mode, which is great on the uphill. It allows a little more mobility with your ankle. They have Vibram soles, which will help if you need to ever boot pack, scramble over some rocks. It's awesome. They're typically lighter than most resort boots, which again is awesome on the uphill. And we also recommend a slightly roomier fit because for your resort boots, you're pretty much skiing all day, except for when you like walk to lunch or something like that. But with your touring boots, you're doing a lot more walking in them. So like a slightly roomier fit is normally advantageous. And then again, compatibility with bindings. So the main thing about most touring specific boots, they're like made to work with tech bindings, which is a different like step-in mode than your resort boots. So if you have tech bindings, you definitely need tech or touring boots. If you have frame bindings, they kind of make it so most will work with both. Like a resort boot works with frame bindings, and they are starting to make touring boots that work with both. But no matter what, just make sure those two match. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get out and have fun with your gear. And then with that, we've got a quick little video. A big part of touring is the transitions, and no one really tells you too much about those, but that's basically when you're going uphill in your tour mode, and then you get to the top and you're ready to go down. Do you want to switch to ride mode? You gotta like click your heel in and take your skins off and all that. So here we've got a quick video showing a transition from going uphill to downhill. So I'll let this go, and if it's too loud, someone let me know. So there you go. And I'm laughing because Kendra in the chat says, appreciate the quick pan to the doggo. Yes, there is a quick little cameo of my dog in there. But that's kind of a speeded up version of transitioning. And I meant to tell you this beforehand, but with skiing, there's kind of two different ways to transition. You can take your skis off completely and rip your skins and switch over the bindings and do all that with your skis off, or you can leave them on, which requires a little bit more balance, but it seems to help in trickier situations and it can be a little bit faster. So I showed one of each, which is maybe why you were like, this isn't like symmetrical, what's happening. I just wanted to like demonstrate both versions. And now with that, you've heard a lot about skiing. So I'm gonna hand it over to Ellie to tell you about split boards. Oh wait, I gotta go to the next slide. There we go. Okay.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. So let's dive into split boards. Very similarly to picking out good skis, is you really want to consider a lot of different things when you're shopping for split boards. So similarly, you want to ask yourself, what is your preferred riding style? Are you somebody who prefers skiing in trees? Or do you like big powder days? Are you kind of like an all mountain rider? Do you like bowls? Or do you like moguls? I don't know really many snowboarders who really like moguls, but it happens. Are you somebody that like is really playful, like kind of a park rat, likes to hit pillows and be able to ride switch? So those are all things that you want to consider because different split boards come with their different advantages and disadvantages. Really more can be more focused on one specific type of terrain or a couple different types of terrain. Also want to ask yourself, like, what's your budget? Now, obviously, when you're just getting into the backcountry, this stuff's expensive. Like getting a setup and then getting your avalanche courses and all your gear. I mean, you're looking at a lot of money. And then you're just hoping that you end up liking it because you've already spent a lot. So anytime you can sort of make that wallet hurt a little bit less, I think is advantageous. So if this is something that you already know you're going to love it and you're really ready to invest in, maybe you can go for that more expensive split board or setup versus you're not really sure yet. You just need something that's going to be kind of a great all-around board, going to get you out the door and onto the hill. Also, your level of experience. Sometimes you might want to start with something that's just like, you know, like I said, the budget board that can do a little bit of everything. It's not going to come with all the bells and whistles. It's not going to be quite as light as, say, a carbon board that's going to be more expensive versus somebody who is like an advanced to expert rider who really knows what they are really want and what kind of rider they are. They can ride in anything. They need something that just charges super hard. They want to get in that super deep powder or in those couloirs. So all questions to ask yourself as far as what kind of terrain you're going to be in and what splitboard is going to work with your personal style. So I've put up on this slide, we at Weston, we have 4 different splitboards. We actually have 2 different graphics for the Eclipse, which is that that third one, or excuse me, third one, yeah. So second from the right, I suppose I should say, because we do also have the Brooklyn Bell, which matches the Summit skis from the previous slides. They're the same board, they just have different top sheets, so you get a little bit of variety there. But mostly we just have these, 4 different boards, and each one has its different uniqueness to it, depending on what you're kind of looking for. So I'm not going to go into great detail about each one, but I did list some of the specifics about each one. The Riva is the one closest to the left-hand side. That's really an all mountain free rider. It's really good in powder. It's stiffer. That's one that's probably like my go-to board in the backcountry. I have a couple different Weston split boards, but I tend to ride the Riva the most, just because it's so versatile. It is a directional board, meaning it's got that like narrow tail, wider nose, and it's set back with where your stance is, where you're located, where you're standing on the board. So it's a little bit harder to ride switch. So if you're somebody who likes to ride switch, you can ride it in this board, but not as easily as, for instance, the Rise, which is that next one, the run in the red. This is a directional twin. So it has the bigger nose, narrow tail, but it's the stance, or excuse me, am I saying that right, Sarah Mac?
Well, you were, sorry, I was like in a different world.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, never mind. Go back to what you're doing. Getting back to the Rise. So directional twin. All of our boards do have camber rocker hybrid. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the differences. A rocker is a board or a ski that kind of has like a U shape, whereas a camber kind of has more of like an N shape. So a camber rocker hybrid has the best of both worlds. So if you look at it, if you're just holding the board like horizontally in front of you, it kind of looks like a wave, meaning it's going to have camber beneath underfoot and then rocker on the outside. So you're going to get camber, which is going to give you that good purchase on the snow, especially for traveling uphill, where, like Sarah said, you want to have as much contact against the snow when you're touring as possible, so that like if you're in icy situations, you're going to stick really well and not slide around everywhere. But then also having the rocker profile, which is going to stick that nose up in the air so that you're not going to sink in that deeper powder. So then the next one would be the Eclipse board. If you're somebody who likes to ride switch, obviously, if you look at the tail of that guy, that's probably not going to be your first choice because it does have that crescent moon shape to it. This is a really awesome board, but it is obviously a powder specific board. Not to say you can't enjoy this at the resort or on more variable terrain, but it's clearly made as a powder specific board and is going to be beneficial on those days. It's also like more of a medium to stiff on that stiffness scale, excuse me, but still has enough pop to it that you're going to be able to have fun. And like, if you're somebody that likes to do jumps, you're still going to be able to do that. And then lastly, the Seeker, which is on the far right. I mentioned getting into the backcountry is very expensive. So if you're just getting into it, you're not really sure that you're going to love this. This is more of a budget friendly board. Now, like I said, it's not going to have all the bells and whistles as say the Riva or the Eclipse, but it still is a really great board. I mean, because all of our boards are fantastic and well built and really taking into account like a women's specific need as far as a split board, trying not to make them super heavy. Now this one is not going to be as light as some of the other boards, but still not going to, weigh 1,000 pounds on your feet. It's still going to give you plenty of control, and can be ridden on all different types of terrain. So it's another all mountain board. It's just a little bit more budget friendly. Okay, next slide. Oh, actually stay on the slide. I'm sorry, I'm gonna go back really quickly. Thanks. Okay, so the little cartoon in the middle there, I just want to quickly mention that as far as picking out a size for split board, typically, and this is not, a blanket statement, but for the most part, the way that you size your board is if you're somebody that likes to ride park, you'll probably start your board size up to about here, maybe neck to chin, if you hold it up against yourself. Then if you're going to the resort, up to mouth or so, mouth to nose. And then once you get into the backcountry, I think conversely to skiing, it's kind of like the bigger, the better for backcountry. So like nose, maybe up to eyes or so. You don't want to get too big because otherwise it's going to be really difficult to control. It's going to be really heavy and hard to turn. But generally, if you're in the backcountry, you want as much surface area against the snow to keep from sinking, while keeping in mind that you don't want it to be too big. So that's kind of a good, just general frame of reference for those. Okay, cool. Next slide, thanks. Okay, so for bindings and boots, it's kind of similar to skiing. Things that you want to consider are how comfortable are they? You're going to be spending a lot of time, several hours out in these things. So you want to make sure when you're testing them out, and I will say, try to test these out at a gear shop if you can, or get on demo days at the resorts, just to see how these are going to feel, because making sure that they don't have any hot spots, because that does happen. And, that's the last thing you want to have to deal with when you're spending several hours out there. Taking into account the weights, some of them are quite heavy. So for instance, I have Karakorums. I also have Sparks. The Karakorums are more durable, in my opinion, because they're like a more solid metal, but they also weigh more. So thinking about what's important to you, as far as like what is more important for, saving weight, or maybe a little bit having something a little more durable. Do you like something that's a little bit more flexible, or do you like something that's more stiff? Ease of use. So I cannot tell you, one of my least favorite things to do is having to transition when it's freezing cold and I'm on the top of a mountain and the wind is blowing and my fingers stop working. So you want to make sure when you're choosing bindings that this is something that you can get in and out of very, very quickly, and not having to be like fiddling with your gloves and taking them off and then like chipping away at ice that may be stuck to them. How quickly can you take them off, do your transition, put them back on? Because with snowboarding, it's a little bit different than skiing. We actually do have to take our bindings off, and put our skis into a board and then put them back on. So also keeping in mind that some bindings are not compatible with the base plates or hardware. So I mentioned Karakorum and Spark, they are not interchangeable. So if you have Karakorum base plates, you cannot buy Spark bindings and use those. If you have Karakorum bindings, they will come with the base plates as part of the binding setup. It's just included when you buy them. Versus a Spark, or some of the other brands, if you buy the bindings, they often don't come with the base plates. And so you'll have to buy those separately. So that's just something that you're going to want to do a little research on, because again, that can contribute to additional price if you're not really, taking that into account up front. And you don't want to be surprised later and be like, oh, shoot, I'm ready to go out today. Uh-oh, I don't have base plates. So yeah, just doing a little bit more research. And like I said, you may have to purchase those pucks separately. I get the canted pucks, which means that they're not flat on the board. They kind of turn a little bit, and it just helps on longer days, or if I'm having like a really high vertical day. It is more of a natural stance to have that like sort of turned inward, and a little bit easier on your knees. And then as far as boots, there's splitboard specific boots for, which is great. But the nice thing is you don't necessarily have to buy those right out. if you're just getting into it and you're already spending a lot of money, this is a good place to maybe save some bucks at the beginning. You absolutely can use your resort boots. And then if you decide you want to stick with it and they're not as comfortable, maybe switching over into a splitboard specific. Splitboarding has really come a long ways in the last several years, and they're now making hard boot setups, which are completely different set of bindings, and obviously a hard boot more like a ski boot. And a lot of advanced riders are getting into that, but that's an additional purchase. So if you're just starting out, resort boots are perfectly fine. Now, when you do decide to get into a splitboard specific boot, some things to consider are that they're usually more of a stiffer boot. And with that, they tend to weigh a significant amount more than the resort boot would. But there are advantages to that. So they might come with a rubber sole, that Vibram sole, which is great for if you are somebody who wants to do some more like kind of mountaineering style of touring. They will have the tough rubber toe box. This photo in the slide here is a great example where it's got that rubber toe box. It's also has the crampon compatible bottom there. And so if you're, again, somebody who likes to do the mountaineering, that's going to be important because it can be really hard to get a crampon to stick to a resort boot, and especially if they're more of a soft boot. They may also feature a walk mode, which is really great if you're that uphill focused skier like Sarah mentioned, and you're spending hours and hours and hours putting in miles to get to your destination. Then you're going to want something that's comfortable for those hours, and being able to take those longer strides, which you can do with a walk mode, where it's basically just like kind of opens up at the top. That's going to be a nice benefit to have. But again, keeping in mind that these do tend to be heavier. This specific boot that's on the slide here is quite heavy. And if you have a really comfortable resort boot that you just absolutely love, stick with it. Why not? Okay, next slide. Okay, so getting into skins, this is for skiers and snowboarders alike. Just want to make sure that you are buying the skins that are specific to skis or snowboards, depending on which you do. They are not interchangeable, and they're not the cheapest. So we recommend a nice mohair mix. There are different kinds of skins, meaning different materials, some that have nylon and some that have mohair. The best ones are the ones that have a mix, because they both have their advantages and disadvantages. So nylon has really great traction, but it tends to be heavier, but it's also more durable. So it might not glide as well. So if you're doing those big, long, high mileage days, nylon might tire your legs out a little bit faster than something like mohair. Mohair is going to have that good glide. But on the downside, it's not as sticky. So if you're doing something that's like on more of an incline, or you have to do a turn, I mean, it can be more difficult with something that's just straight mohair. These do tend to be a thinner skin, so they're a little bit more packable in your bag, or if you're stowing them on the inside of your jacket while you're going down, and they do weigh less. So getting a nice mix is really the best of both worlds. Pomoka makes a really good skin. I think they have actually 2 different styles that you can get. So when you buy them, you're going to have to cut them down to size, meaning you'll cut them specifically to fit your skis. So if you have 2 different setups that are different size boards or different shape boards, you may not be able to use the same set of skins for both. You may have to get 2 sets of skins. And then cut each one to fit, because they're so highly individualized. And you do want to do this really carefully, and make sure that you're maybe watching a YouTube video, or bringing them into a gear shop and having somebody experienced do it for you, because clearly, you obviously only get one chance to cut these, and if you make a mistake, you're not going to be the happiest. So when I first did it, I looked at a YouTube video, and then I just like triple checked as I was like cutting, and kept coming back to it and just doing it really slowly, and it worked out great. But yeah, you can always bring anybody at a gear shop would be happy to cut them for you. If you show up with a 6-pack, they're gonna love you. So thing to consider is that the metal edges should be showing. Those like tiny little metal edges on the sides should be showing, because that's going to give you that good purchase when you're going up and trying to stick to the side of the slope. But with your trimmer, that'll have like an indentation to allow that metal edge to show. Now, as far as maintenance and storage, you want to make sure that you keep your skins clean and dry in between each use. So you want to hang them up somewhere where they're going to be away from dust, away from heat, and away from dog hair. I learned that the hard way. I have a husky. Anybody who has a husky knows exactly what I'm talking about. So I like to hang mine over the shower and just close the bathroom door, and they dry out really well there. You don't ever want to hang them in front of a fireplace, because there's a possibility they're going to melt the glue on the inside of the skins, and then you'll have to re-glue them, and that's a total pain in the butt. It sucks. So nowhere near high heat, but making sure that they get completely dry between each use. Now, if you're on a hut trip and you're going out every single day, they may not get completely dry in between, but most, they're going to get dry enough that they're still going to work the next day. Then as far as storing them, when you're out in the field, you can, what I like to do is get a skin saver, which is just a mesh piece that goes in between, and then you just kind of stick them on each side of the mesh, and then you can roll them or fold them and stick them in your bag or tuck them into your shirt. I am not in the biggest, I don't love, so just kind of take each skin and stick it glue side to glue side. I don't really love doing that personally, because I don't have a lot of arm strength. And when I'm in the backcountry, I don't want to have to be trying to pull each side of my skins apart. It's a total pain in the butt. I have actually had to have somebody help me, and we each take a side and are pulling, our lives depend on it to get them apart. I'm also a wimp, so yeah, it happens. But so having that mesh skin saver is just a really awesome additive, and it doesn't weigh anything or take up any space really. So it's nice to have that, so you don't have to fight with your skins later. I will say, never ever put your glue side to the furry side, ever. You're going to ruin your glue. So then when you're not using them, like in the off season and in summertime, I stick mine in the freezer. You can always store them in the garage or in your gear closet, but the freezer is a really good spot to keep them if it's a low humidity freezer, that is, because it keeps them nice and dry and keeps things, it just saves the glue and prolongs the life of the skins. People often complain that the skin shelf life is not as long as they had hoped, maybe only getting a couple seasons. I've had the same pair of skins for 8 years now, and they still are in great shape. So it's just all about making sure you take care of them, keeping them as clean as you possibly can, and drying them in a clean environment. And then when you're on the field also, you want to try to, as best you can, to not let them, just don't toss them in the snow. You don't want them to get it, wet if you can save it. Obviously they're going to get wet being on your skis or snowboard, but glue side, you want to try to keep snow away from that, because that's going to cause the glue to fail or not stick to your skis or snowboard as well. In the event that does happen, because it will occasionally happen, that's what ski straps are for, and we will recommend carrying as many as you can. Always throw plenty of them in your backpack. We'll go through the gear list later, and that's obviously on there. But things happen in the backcountry, things that you never anticipate, things that don't happen at the resort. I have had bindings completely break apart. I actually had a toe strap fall off completely. And I've had my skins lose their stickiness and just had to strap them in 4 different areas. So taking kind of those few extra seconds to inspect your gear, or just be a little bit more cautious when you're out in the field, is going to save you a lot of headache later. Okay, next slide. Okay, so then Sarah Mack made this awesome video about transitioning with a splitboard, because it is a little bit different than skiing in the sense that you do actually have to get off your gear, unfortunately, for snowboarders. But with a little practice, and you can do this at home, like just in your living room or whatever, to kind of get it down, that'll make the transition a lot faster once you're out in the field. So take it away. Awesome. Okay, so a couple of things that I want to point out really quickly from the video that Sarah did really well are when you are transitioning, you're going from ski mode to ride mode. Depending on the type of terrain, if you're not on something that's flat, it's always a good idea to stick your skis into the snow vertically so that one of them doesn't just go sliding down the mountain. I did have that happen. It was actually during my avalanche course. It was really embarrassing. The other thing is to clean off the edges. So as you're touring up, it's really easy to get ice buildup along those edges, on the sidewalls there. And so when you're going to put your snowboard back together, those inner walls can still have ice. You just want to make sure that you clean that out so that it comes together more just better, I suppose. And so it's not wobbly when you go to use it on the downhill. I think that's it. Okay, so then getting into poles. A little bit different for skiers and snowboarders, obviously, because skiers are always going to use their poles. Snowboarders are only going to use it on the uphill, well, for the most part. So it's keeping that in mind for splitboarding. You want to think about what is going to be most beneficial to you personally. So there's a couple different styles that you can buy. Of course, you can use a ski pole, but just remember it's not going to be as easy to stow that later. So you're just going to have to be holding it as you ride. So there are a couple different options instead of using a ski pole. Z poles, which is what's pictured here. Those are poles that just kind of collapse into a Z shape. What I like about these specifically is that they tend to be smaller than a collapsible pole. Which just has like the clips and then slides into itself. So they're easier to stow into your backpack. And so that it's not sticking out on your backpack and catching on stuff, especially if you're a tree rider or something like that. But a collapsible is usually a more affordable option. And if you're somebody short or you don't need a long pole, a lot of times they'll collapse pretty small anyway. And those are also a good option for skiers because if you're not somebody who needs to constantly be using a pole, if you like to do more tricks or something like that, and or just aren't dependent on poles, it's a good all-around option. Other things to consider are the material, the weight. Not all poles weigh the same. Comfort level as far as the hand setting. So these are made with corks here in this picture. A lot of other ones are going to be rubber. The strap material sometimes can be sort of irritating after a long day, or the cork tends to be a little bit better in like a colder material than a rubber or a metal. A lot of times the certain models will have a longer surface area of the strap. So if you're somebody who likes to choke up on holding that strap, like kind of down lower, for something that's like a really steep terrain going up, oftentimes it's nice to have that elongated rubber area so that you're not having to hold the metal, which is really, really cold. And then also, if you're a more advanced rider, something that might be compatible with a whippet. So a whippet is, it's a ski pole that has an ice axe head that can attach to it. Now, if you're just more of a recreational tour, you don't need to worry about something like that. But if you're somebody who's an advanced rider who knows right off the bat that you're going to want to be getting into more mountaineering kind of terrain, or doing more mixed climbing on the uphill, then it might be a good idea to go ahead and invest in that at the beginning, just to save yourself from having to purchase it later. Okay, next slide. All right, and then I'm going to turn it over to Sarah Mack for packs.
Ooh, I think this is actually me.
Just kidding.
Other Sarah.
One of the Sarahs.
Yeah. So packs, that's where you're carrying all your gear. It's on your body at almost all times. You're going to be getting into it fairly frequently. And so you want to make sure you find something that works for you. Things to consider. There's a lot. Designated Avi gear storage. That one's a huge one. A lot of people might just try to use their standard like backpacking bag, which can work, but having that designated Avi gear storage area is super important, and I would highly, highly recommend getting a bag with that, because if anything ever happens, you don't want to be like digging through just like a giant compartment with everything in it to try to find the gear you need. You want to be able to go like straight to your shovel, straight to your probe. So that's a really important thing to look for. Pretty much if you're looking at ski bags, backcountry ski bags, they're all going to have that. Accessibility, that's like, how many different compartments are there? How is there like a goggle packet? Is there hip pouches? Is it only, can you get in from the top, or can you get in from the back as well? Those are all really your own personal preference. So I just recommend taking some time to like think about what's important to you, maybe speaking with people that you know and seeing like what features they really like or what they don't really care about. And maybe if you have the opportunity to try anything out, that's great. Another thing, like helmet carry is pretty awesome. And if you're someone who wants to have like a camelback, the insulated kind, I don't do that, so I don't know how well they work, but like, do you want a hydration sleeve or something like that? All things to think about, and that'll help you kind of narrow down your search for sure. And then ski and board carrying designs, obviously I'd say most of the time, at least through the majority of the winter, we have our skis or our boards on our feet, but we'll come into times, especially when you get into like bigger spring missions or just any terrain that calls for it, we might be boot packing. And in that case, you're going to need to put your gear on your bag, hopefully not your shoulders, because that gets, I don't know about you guys, but my shoulders are like so, they're so weak. And just like even carrying my skis in the parking lot at a resort, I get like bruised shoulders. So having to boot pack with like skis on my shoulder for a long period of time is not ideal for me. And I think that's most people. So thinking about how the pack can help you carry your skis or board, whether that's A-frame, diagonal, vertical, just another thing to consider. And yeah, definitely just check how that is. And then capacity / usage. So that kind of speaks for itself. How big is the bag? How much stuff can you put in it? And to help you figure out what would work for you, think about, are you doing like half day? We're going to be mainly doing half days. Are you going to be doing like really long days or hut trips with this bag? And kind of tailoring it to that. And I will say, and I think these ladies might agree with me, like if you go a little bigger, you could always cinch it down. And so even if you're not using all that space in the moment, you might be really happy the next day you have like an all-day mission and you can bring all your snacks plus water and like a thermos of hot chocolate. It's great, and all your layers. And so I'd say typically kind of like 30 to 40 liters is fairly standard for day trips, and can, like on the upper end of that, you can make it work for overnighters, but it's a stretch. But that's just kind of something to give you a little bit of a frame of reference. And then lastly, fit. A lot of brands are starting to offer women-specific packs, which typically help if they have a shorter torso, I believe. I'm actually not a great person to talk about this because I'm 6 feet tall. So typically I don't shop in this department for gear because I'm not built like the majority of women, but I have a lot of friends who love women specific fat packs because it fits them a lot better. So I'd say definitely get an opportunity to try both on and make sure like the torso frame fits you and that like the waist belt fits, and then you don't have like straps that are super duper long once you've cinched everything down.
Hey, Sarah,
Yeah.
interrupt if I can. So I am 5'6", and I have the Mammut Pro women's specific pack, which I absolutely love. I did try on a men's version of this pack, and it was way too long, and the strap gap was like that much. I mean, it was like a full 2 inches. So switching over to the women's specific, it's a perfect fit for my size, and it can cinch down even further for somebody who's smaller. So it is worth it to try on some women's specifics if you can find them.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for adding that, Ellie. So yeah, that's kind of like a pretty basic rundown of packs and what to look for. And that kind of brings us to airbags. They're like one of the newer things on the market in terms of avalanche safety. People want to know, like, is this necessary, or do I need it? Do I don't? And basically what we like to say is airbags are a great complement to basic avalanche safety gear when riding in avalanche terrain. It's not necessary. It's not a replacement at all for proper avalanche education and skills. I think some people are like, oh, sweet, here's this tool that like, no matter what, I just pull the cord and I'm good. And like, if I can avalanche, it's fine. But there's a lot more to it than that. You need to like be able to do that in a high intensity scenario. But also if you're in trees, like your airbag could get popped. It's not like a, just get it, check the box and you're safe. It's a great tool to add to your knowledge and your brain and everything else you already know, or you hopefully will soon to be knowing about avalanche awareness. And if that's something that you decide you want to go that route, some things to consider are the type of system. There's like compressed air and nitrogen, and there's also ones that are like powered by fans. So like the compressed air and nitrogen, that's typically a one-time use, and then you need to go to a shop and fill it up. Fans are battery powered, so they can work multiple times, but they need to be sure you're charging the battery. Travel compatibility, some of the canisters, they don't work, like TSA won't let you bring them through, or at least not full. So that's just a thing to think about. Are you going to be doing a lot of like trips where you're flying to areas where you want to have your avalanche bag with you? A lot of places typically will rent canisters as well, but just something to think about. A removable airbag system, a fair amount of bags make it so you can have the airbag system in there or not, which is great if you want one bag for everything, and you know you have days when you don't want to, you're not going to be in like any Abbey terrain, you're playing it really mellow, and you'd rather just have that extra space. You can take them out. It is typically, in my experience, kind of a pain taking them in and out, so I leave mine in at all times, but something to think about what your preference is. Again, size and weight. When you add the airbag components in, it adds a little more weight to like a standard bag that doesn't have that airbag component. And as well as the size, it kind of takes up some room in your bag. So it's just another thing to think about. And then everything we just talked about on that last slide still applies to airbags. And so we just want to leave you with the remembering that airbags aren't a substitute for a proper avalanche education skills. You should definitely get that first. This is a great tool to add on, but it's not a substitute at all. Which then brings us to Abby gear. And I'm going to throw that over to Sarah. Although, do we want to take a quick intermission, or are people feeling good and just keep moving?
So we have, I think, a couple more slides about packing list, and then we'll hit the
Okay, well, then we're going to keep moving.
That works. Yeah, cool. So the last piece of the equipment puzzle is your avalanche gear. These items are just as important as board bindings and skins when traveling in the backcountry. So next slide. So your beacon, shovel, and probe, also known as your avalanche transceiver, are the main items that you need to locate and extract your partner in a rescue. So for your beacon, we recommend a beacon with 3 antennae versus older models, which may only have 1 or 2. And so that really is the standard. I particularly wanted to just say that, tracker 1 beacons are a really common avalanche beacon that just don't have enough antenna. And what that means is it doesn't really give you a 3D representation of what's below the snowpack, nor does it give the receiving beacon a good idea of your exact location. So it really is the standard to have a up-to-date 3 antenna transceiver. And if you already have one, I do just want to reiterate that up-to-date part, like check with the manufacturer, because a lot of manufacturers have updates for the system that you can just send them in. Like I know BCA, they sent me a shipping label so that I could send in my beacon, and they updated it for me and they sent it back just to make sure that my frequency is transmitting at a level that can be received by most beacons, by all beacons. So that's a really important one. And then moving on to the shovel, you just want to make sure that it's an avalanche specific shovel, not just some basic like plastic shovel that you may have picked up at Walmart or something. And with that, you also want to think about the blade size. Like if I'm really in an emergency situation where I need to extract my partner from the snow, I want to know that I have a blade big enough that can move snow as fast as possible. So you just basically, like with this equipment, you don't want to be kicking yourself later on for going ultra light or trying to like buy something cheaper when you're actually having to dig your friend out. You don't want to put yourself in that situation. So there are all sorts of different features that you can find with your shovel, one of which is home mode, where the shovel has the ability to reposition into an L shape, which can sometimes move snow more efficiently. And there's also, a couple different styles of handles that you can look for. But yeah, the real big one is that it's not plastic. Make sure it's made of metal, it's avalanche specific, and ideally it's collapsible so it fits in your pack well. Moving on to probes. So the probe is what you're going to use to probe into the snow to find your partner if they are fully buried. And it's a weird thing, but it just feels different. So that's kind of how you use it. And it's a really important tool to being able to locate your friend once you have narrowed in that lowest signal with your avalanche transceiver. We recommend a probe of at least 280 centimeters or more is better. 300 to 320 centimeters is particularly better for regions that see deeper snowpacks, which means there's just more snow that's able to pile up on top of your partner. So I do want to, I added this photo onto this slide. This is a photo that was taken by Erin Lane, who is a volunteer she's a volunteer for search and rescue down in Silverton, Colorado. And this is a photo of an extraction from an avalanche down in Mineral Creek near Ophir last season. The victim was buried 16 feet below the surface, and they just don't make probes that long. And so this for me just really drives home, like, if you can't reach all the way down to just verify that that person is below the snow surface before you start digging, think of how many tons of snow they had to dig to just to get down to the person. If it's not long enough, then again, you'll be kicking yourself. So you may as well go longer. I wouldn't skimp on something like a probe that can really reduce the amount of time it takes you to extract your partner, to dig your partner out. So the most important thing about your gear is that you know how to use them. Can you use them efficiently, and that you practice using them often. So in a rescue scenario, seconds mean life or death. So practice putting together your shovel and extending your probe. practice rescue scenarios at least once a season with your riding partners. And I definitely recommend, and we'll get to this on a later slide, taking avalanche rescue courses regularly as well. And then I did want to just say, like, keep in mind, we haven't really covered snow study tools in depth here. These snow study tools are tools that you're going to want when you do get into your avalanche education class. Something like a saw, which allows you to cut out columns that you'll use to like test the stability of the snow. Things like a loop where you can look at little grain particles of the snow. And those are just, there's basically never ending options to study the snow once you go down that path of nerdery. So now let's let Ellie give us a quick review of kind of everything that we just covered here.
Thanks. Okay, so Weston put together this really awesome chart of the packing list for what you might need when you're going out in the backcountry. This list is available on the website, so you can just head on over there and print it out. What I think, because I'm super organized nerd, I have this printed and then I put it into a little plastic sleeve, so then I can take like a dry erase marker and literally check things off as I'm getting my gear together, and then like erase it later and start over the next time. Also, really quickly, since somebody mentioned it in the chat, asking what a ski strap was. This is the ski strap. Hold on, let me grab another one. This guy, it's just a little rubber. There's different lengths. I have like half a dozen of these in just different lengths. I like to carry a couple in my pack that are different sizes depending on what my needs might end up being. So that way, like I said, if your skin fails and it's not going to stick to your ski or your slipboard, you can just wrap it around and attach it, and then it'll hold it. The situation I had where my toe strap came off, I was able to use the ski strap to keep my foot in place so that I wasn't like wobbling on the toe. Anyway, back to the packing list. We covered a lot already just with our previous slides, but just some other things, of course, boots, maybe a two-way radio or a walkie, a Garmin might be a good option, like a personal locator beacon in addition to your transceiver, avalanche gear. Now, when we say radio, we don't mean like a boom box or a Bluetooth speaker or even headphones, because you want to be able to hear what's going on in your environment and not just be like blasting tunes. I know it sucks going up sometimes and you really have to dig in hard to get up the hills, but you also want to be taking in the sounds of nature and what's happening, the movement that's happening on the mountain, especially if you're in higher avalanche prone areas or on a glacier, where it's really important to be able to hear those things coming. Skin wax, it's always nice to have, even in, usually you wax before you go, but it's always nice to have that just thrown in your backpack as well. Crampons, in the springtime, if you're getting into those more mountaineering types of missions, maybe, so there are splitboard specific and ski specific crampons that actually go onto the gear itself. And then there's also boot crampons that attach to your boots and while you're carrying your ski or splitboard on your back. As far as clothing, goggles, also perhaps glacier glasses, depending on what region you're in or the what kind of sun level you're in. Also sunglasses. With backcountry, your clothing is really all about layering, much more so than at a resort, because as you're going up, you're exerting a lot of heat. You're going to be peeling off layer after layer so that you're not sweating, whereas then you're going to want to put it back on as you go down. What I particularly like to do, I will generally just wear like a long sleeve base layer as I'm going up, and maybe like a thin mid layer. I'm somebody who runs cold all the time. So if it starts snowing, I may just have my base layer and my shell and skip the mid layer. And then when I go to transition, when you've stopped moving, it's really easy for, you know, the wind to give you a chill, and you get freezing in those couple of minutes between the uphill and downhill modes. And so I may not even take off my shell. I may just have a puffy jacket that's big enough that I can throw it on over my shell. And that way I can then take it back off once I'm done transitioning and I don't need it anymore. So just things to consider like that. I am a big fan of the onesie. I actually wear a onesie. I love it. I just got it last year. I don't care if it looks dumb. I actually think it looks really cool. But when you're on the backcountry, there's a lot of powder, and you don't want to be getting powder in places where the sun doesn't shine, because it gets really cold. You can't just go into a restroom or into a hut and get warm and dry. So having either a bib, kind of pants, or something that's going to keep the snow out, something really waterproof, something with tape seams, is always going to be advantageous, especially if you're in areas that are more wet. I'm from the East Coast. I'm from New Hampshire. I did see one of you from New Hampshire, so hello. And it's called the Ice Coast for a reason. It usually snows and then it rains, and so it's really wet. If you're in the PNW, I know you get that really super wet, humid, heavy snow. And so things with a really high level of waterproofing are going to be live free or die. Awesome. Are going to be beneficial. Even here in Colorado, where we have the cold smoke kind of snow, where it's really dry powder, eventually it's going to get sticky and you're going to get wet. So being able to keep things off of you and keep yourself warm is really important. And then couple different types of gloves or mittens. I'm a mittens person in particular, but with backcountry, it's usually not a one size fits all. You'll generally have a couple different pair. I like to have a liner glove, and usually with like I forgot what they're called, but where you can like use your phone, the touch screen capability. That's what it is. And then I'll have like a medium insulated mitten, and then I might have also like a really like an expedition style mitten if it's a super cold day. I also will throw in rechargeable hand warmers. I'll talk about that on the next slide. Obviously your avalanche gear, which we already went over, beacon, shovel, probe. You might get into a little bit later as you further your avalanche career, more like snow science, snow study kits, which you can bring with you. Good things to also have, obviously, your first aid kit. It might, you know, the more down the rabbit hole with first aid you get, the more stuff you might carry. I carry a very robust first aid kit, so I am prepared for practically any situation, because things happen out there in the snow and you can't just call 911 and have an ambulance come pick you up. Spare laces if you have a lace-up boot, or a spare BOA system if your boots are a BOA system. You may want to have an emergency bivvy, or at the very least like a reflective heat blanket, lighter or waterproof matches. Obviously, food. Try to pick food that is going to be good in the cold. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, cold pizza, things like that. Candy bars are my go-to in the summertime. They are absolutely not my go-to in the wintertime, because I don't know if you've ever tried biting into a frozen Snickers bar, but you're going to break your teeth. So things that are going to be edible when it's freezing cold outside. Hot soup, great option. And then obviously sunblock, a multi-tool, because stuff is going to break. Spare tools. I have a little spark tool that has different types of screwdriver heads on it, so that I can make little tweaks to my bindings, or if something's loose, I can tighten it up right there out on the snow. I have lost screws out in the snow on several occasions, and so it's really nice to always check before you go, but also carry that little tool. It's tiny. It can, you can just throw it anywhere in your pack, and so that you're more prepared. And then obviously having a headlamp. This is just part of your 10 essentials you're always that you would always have in the summertime. You're going to need to have in your backcountry kit for the winter time. So things like map and compass, And then next slide. And then we just added some additional items that weren't included on the Weston packing list that are more like ladies specific or just things that I think are more handy. Spare batteries, this is a no-brainer. Thermos with a hot beverage, your phone, a lot of, I mean, we're in the age of technology, of course, and so there are a lot of apps, which we'll talk about later, that will have good reference materials for you as far as like terrain, different types of zones, avalanche dangers, different maps and things. So it's nice to be able to reference your phone. Obviously, when it gets cold out, your electronics don't work, you drain the battery quite fast. So it can be helpful to also carry one of those portable chargers so that you can charge up really quickly if you need to. Then I did mention hand warmers briefly before. In this photo, those are rechargeables. I particularly like those because they're eco-friendly, but if you're somebody who prefers the typical hot hands, those are great to have as well. And then also a spare ski basket. You can never have enough ski baskets, which is kind of funny. You don't think about losing them, but I have lost them myself, and I have actually collected these in the summertime on trails when I was out hiking. And they do fall off, especially if they just twist on. They can just as easily twist off. So it's nice to have at least one extra in case that happens. And then if you're getting into more glacier mountaineering, where you're going to be doing rope travel, oftentimes, if you're on a rope, it's not as easy to go to the bathroom. I know this is kind of a funny topic, but it is practical. So it's nice to have an option, and that would be using something like a Go Girl, so like a portable urine funnel device, which is in the picture here. Must be nice to be a guy. You can just turn your back and pee away. But for a woman, it's, if you're attached to a rope, especially, and you don't want to detach from that, and you can't walk far away and get some privacy behind a tree. It's nice to have a urine funnel to just be able to stand there and be discreet. Also, having to squat in snow really sucks, and it's cold. So it's nice to not have to do that just in any situation in the backcountry. So they're handy. Oh, and then really quickly, the last one, an inclinometer. Couple different kinds that you can get. You can actually get like an individual inclinometer. That's its own measurement. It's just a little, handheld thing that tells you the slope angle, which is very handy when you're making some assessments as far as avalanche terrain. But there's also stickers that you can buy online. They're quite affordable, and they'll attach to your ski pole, and then you just hold up your ski pole against the snow, and it'll give you that slope angle. So that's an option as well. I think that's it. Awesome. Okay, so I think this is where we can take a brief intermission if anybody needs one. Sarah, do you want to come back on? I don't know how much time do you think we should give people?
Can we do just 5 and then come back on at 7:30?
Oh, perfect. Yeah, great timing.
Yeah.
So
And we'll just plow through a couple more slides about getting started, and then have a little bit of time for questions.
Awesome. Okay, so if you guys need to go to the bathroom, get a drink, grab a snack, take your dog out, whatever you got to do, we'll come back on at 7:30. I'm going to sit here and hang out. If you guys have questions in the chat, feel free to set those up, and we'll get started again in 5 minutes.
How's the snow there, Sarah?
It's been awesome. We finally got it, which is so
Yes.
nice.
Ah, good.
We went
Yeah.
out on Sunday and it was like way more than we thought we were gonna get, and it was awesome. And then they're supposed to like the next round is like supposed to start tonight, but if it comes, it might go out tomorrow morning.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Yeah. I've been skiing quite a bit. As you know, I moved from Gunnison to Fraser, and the Crested Butte area, the Gunnison area got like 22 inches in the last storm. And,
Nice.
and we only got like 4 inches, and I was like, dang it.
Yeah.
I will take what we can get. It's supposed to
Yeah.
be like 80-mile-per-hour winds tomorrow too.
Oh yeah, it's been like pretty windy here, but I don't think it can compare to there.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully at the end it brings in snow and then the wind stops and you have less.
Yes. I know. Yeah. Hopefully there aren't too bad of wind slabs, but yeah, who knows? Anyway.
Sarah Mac, have you gone out and dug some snow pits and like checked out the different layers to see how the base is shaping up? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I went out on Berthoud Pass. So my partner, as you guys might already know, but the other women on this call don't know this. My partner, Austin DeVesta, he is the Northern Mountains of Colorado. He's the avalanche forecaster. So I get to go out with him and nerd out on snow. And particularly tell him and point out all of his flaws in his data collection. Even though he obviously knows more than me, but that's just our fun little. But anyway, we went out on Sunday to Berthoud Pass, and we were skiing north and northeast facing slopes. And we found that basically the entire snowpack below the 4 or 5 inches of recent storm snow is faceted.
Off to a good start.
Oh, yeah, that's what we got going. Ridgetops had some wind slab development as well. So keep it all angle.
That's pretty typical, I think, for our region, though, is always having that really faceted base layer that's just gonna like break down to the bottom.
Yeah. So yeah, and that's like been one thing that's been kind of going through my mind just always, but always throughout this, but also throughout this discussion, is that we can have so much fun without even touching or breathing on avalanche terrain. Just keep it under 30 degrees. You don't need an airbag if you know how to manage the terrain. And that's anyway what we're going to talk about next, which is a perfect segue if we have everybody back. Well, not quite next, but yeah, so yeah, hopefully everybody's back from the bathroom. Welcome. My name is Sarah Mack. And we're gonna move on to kind of take away from the equipment side of things, which is a lot. And just like, how do we integrate all of these things and able to move forward? So like, what is our next step? The best place to start is here. So you've made it, you're already making a step in the right direction. I think some of you, as I was reading, already have attended one of these before too. And so review and going back and starting at the basics is never a bad thing either. I really think that you guys are smart. Those of you who are coming back for round 2 on this call. So way to go. You're making smart moves already. Start getting the knowledge one step at a time. There really is no rush when we're talking about something as risky as the backcountry. And I always like to think about our mental bandwidth when I think about the backcountry and how important it is to keep your bandwidth clear. So the more knowledge and experience that you're able to gain prior to even entering avalanche terrain, the more of your mental bandwidth will be available to make sound decisions and to take in important observations when you're out in the backcountry. So the first thing, next slide, the first thing that you can do from here, if you haven't already, I know a lot of the women here are already saying like, oh, I'm signed up for an intro course. Well, you guys are all so smart already and you should be teaching this course. But an intro course is is a great place to move from here. Weston hosts a variety of ski and splitboard programs that include free or discounted demos through their guide partners. And San Juan Expeditions, who I work for, is one of those partners. We highly recommend this course for someone just starting out. You get to try a setup without spending $1,500, so you can kind of get the feel for what you like and what you don't like. And you can learn from an experienced guide for way cheaper than most one-day in-resort lift tickets. The greatest benefit is that this course will increase your bandwidth, dialing in your equipment so that your bandwidth is free, again, to absorb the dense content of your avalanche training, which would be kind of next in the progression. We can go to the next slide. But even before you move on to your avalanche education, dial in your equipment, right? So there's lots of shops who offer splitboard and ski demos, and Weston does a ton of public demo days across the US and Canada at resorts that allow uphill access. You can always rent or demo equipment to try out on the resort to try the sport without any avalanche danger. Well, with minimal avalanche danger. So resort demo days or gear rentals, they're free or low cost ways to try out different setups. You can always talk to a gear specialist by attending those events. They're safe, great for beginners. You don't need avalanche education to walk uphill in resort or to attend these demos. And you may already know the area. So resort uphill access. The resort really is the best place to get started, I personally think. So walking uphill in resort allows you to learn what you like and don't like with your equipment, dial in your transitions, dial in your nutrition, dial in your layers, your movement, your fitness, all of these things that can take away from your mental bandwidth if they're not dialed. So you may as well kind of rule out all of these factors before you even enter a situation where there's a greater risk. So every ski resort has kind of a different policy. So you can, usually they have a pretty easy to Google uphill policy. So just use the Google, find out what their policy is and make sure that you're abiding by those rules. They might ask you to sign a waiver. They might ask you to pay a nominal fee. Like for me in Winter Park, my uphill pass was $25 and all the donations went to Grand County Search and Rescue. So I'm okay with paying that, and that's for the entire season. Some resorts, many resorts will ask you to use a designated uphill route during your ascent. Winter Park is actually really awesome because there's like no rules. They're like, cool, go, like don't get in the way of snowmaking or other skiers. And then some resorts will let you bring your dog. Generally it's either like before or after like normal operation hours, like when the lifts aren't running, you might be able to bring your dog, but these are all good things that will be listed on that resort's policy page that you Google. Yeah, next slide. So avalanche education. Tonight, we're not really going to go into too much detail on avalanche education itself, other than to say you really should get it. A companion rescue course and an avalanche level 1 course are pretty much mandatory parts of splitboarding and backcountry skiing if you're accessing avalanche terrain. So whether you book a course with a Weston partner or not, just make sure you get the education. And like I was just saying before, we kind of came back from our intermission, the best tool is avoidance. So in your avalanche level 1 course, you can learn how to identify avalanche terrain, how to plan a good route that avoids avalanche terrain, and therefore just don't even touch it or breathe on it, and then you can have a good time. Next slide, please. So there's a variety of courses out there from a recreational avalanche level 1 to a pro level 2. Pro level 2 is like the highest standard. And if you guys are listening into our little conversation, my boyfriend, who I like to nitpick his data collection, he's a pro level 2 and I'm not. So I have no ground for picking on that. But the pro level 2 is for like the highest avalanche professionals in the industry. If you see yourself going there, I would love to support your path and answer all questions. But you might just check with your local backcountry shop to see what programs are offered near you. And you can also find a comprehensive list of ARI classes on ARI's website, which is avtraining.org. You can filter by state and by what class you want to take. And ARI has classes all over the country that you can choose from. So Weston partners with some of the top guiding services in the industry to provide scholarships, and particularly this season, they have provided scholarships for underrepresented identities in partnership with SheJumps to take some of these avalanche courses, which is so huge and awesome. And with these programs, you can also demo splitboards and skis in combination with your avalanche education programs. SheJumps partners with guide services across the country to offer women-specific level 1, level 2, and avalanche rescue courses. And Sarah will tell you more about other programs that they offer as well outside of avalanche education. And then San Juan Expeditions, of course, I work for them, and we provide women-specific level 1 courses, both hut-based and non-hut, in Colorado's San Juan Mountains. So we recommend starting with a recreational avalanche level 1, at least that's what I recommend. But there are no prerequisites to taking your avalanche level 1 or your avalanche rescue course. So you could start with either of those courses. I'm obviously biased toward taking an ARI specific course. However, you should know that there's plenty of other curriculum out there that isn't ARI that you can still get trained at a really high level of avalanche education from.
I jump in really quick. I just say I'm not biased, but I still recommend taking an ARI course. Nice. So
yes, I really appreciate that. And I mean, I'm just gonna, I'll tell you kind of about my experience down the avalanche education path, and I've taken several different types of curriculum. I took 3 level 1 courses before I felt confident and ready to move on to the next course, and that just goes to say, like, for me, I feel like this knowledge is perishable. These skills are perishable. If you don't use them, you lose them. Thank goodness I haven't had to use a lot of my rescue skills much, but they are perishable. And that was why I wanted to continue taking my level 1 avalanche class. And I have to say, it didn't stick in my brain until I took my ARI specific avalanche level 1 class. So just a kind of a shameless plug, but also I really feel strongly that ARI has a really digestible curriculum. So in your avalanche course, throughout the whole kind of progression, which ends with ARI 2. So it starts with ARI 1, avalanche rescue. You can take either of those. And then after you've taken both of those, you can move on to the ARI 2. You'll learn how to prepare for backcountry travel. You'll learn decision-making tools to assess terrain and managing risk, and rescue techniques. So, and I also just want to kind of bring it back around to this idea of mental bandwidth with regard to my my thoughts about this knowledge being perishable, and that you can take these courses as often as you want. I also wanted to say I would recommend following ARI's Instagram, mainly because I'm in charge of their Instagram. Well, I'm not in charge of it, but I do a lot of the posting, and I make really sure that I'm posting every single scholarship that I see, and every single, tons of our providers across the country host giveaways. They give away free avalanche level 1 courses, or free courses just for women or underrepresented identities. And I try to do a really diligent job of sharing those. So if you want to be the first to know about these opportunities, I would recommend following ARI's Instagram. All right, next slide, first aid and rescue. So the big question is, what happens after you extract your partner? There are likely some medical conditions that you're going to have to deal with that you don't always think about. Like, okay, cool, I got my partner out, now what? We're good to go, right? Well, no, like there's plenty of things that can happen, like trauma and hypothermia, among others. And so we really do recommend taking a wilderness first aid course, or better yet, a wilderness first responder course, if you haven't already. Courses like these give you the skills and confidence to deal with life-threatening situations that may arise one day in the backcountry, and they can help you just be that much more prepared. So are you equipped to save a life? Do you carry a first aid kit with you? And do you know how to use it? The first aid kit should be a part of your essential equipment. Accidents do happen, and ski patrol isn't always there to help you. Particularly, like I don't like the word side country or anything like slack country, because the reality is that's just another way of saying backcountry, because there's no avalanche mitigation there and there's no ski patrol there. So during a burial, avalanche rescue is only half of the battle. And the avalanche rescue itself can take quite a bit of your mental energy. It can be really draining. So make sure you're just prepared on all levels. And I want to bring your attention, like, things to consider. It's cold out there. Winter is cold. Movement should not be a temperature management strategy. If you actually had to perform a rescue, you may not be moving for a while, or your partner, the victim, the person who's buried, may not be able to move in order to get heat flowing through their body. So it's really important to be, I like to call it rescue ready. Like if you think, oh, I'm just going out for like a quick trip in the backcountry, like I don't need to bring much. That's not the answer. I like to bring extra layers no matter what. And in fact, this has proved useful for me. One day when I only went like a mile out, well, I had to remove my friend from the backcountry. We moved 1 mile over the course of 3 hours. She tweaked her knee. It wasn't an avalanche, but it just goes to say that I was really glad that I had extra layers and my rescue sled with me. So that's another thing that you might consider carrying, is a bivy that doubles as a rescue sled with a little bit of cord that will allow you to actually pull that sled out. Ellie already covered bringing a satellite communication device so that you can reach out for support if you need it without cell reception. And again, ski straps. We were talking about this in the chat. They can repair almost everything. And they're a really good tool among a lot of other things. Like one thing that I like to bring too is baling wire, just like a bunch of like kind of good hardy wire that can also repair a lot of things. Trip planning resources. So when avalanches are the problem, terrain is the solution, right? So when avalanche is the problem, do you know how to work a map or build a good tour plan that avoids avalanche terrain? And you can still have fun. Like if you think about it, a 30-degree slope or below is what you want to be on consistently to stay out of avalanche terrain. And a green or a blue run, those are all usually under 30 degrees. And so if you've ever had fun on a green or blue run in resort, then you know that you can have fun out in the backcountry without even entering into avalanche terrain. So knowing how to plan a good route can save your life. You can have a ton of fun on, oh, sorry, I'm reading my notes and I already said that without even entering avalanche terrain. So you'll learn basic mapping skills in avalanche terrain ID in a recreational level 1 course, but I really highly recommend seeking out a more in-depth education on this. And particularly Weston Slay at Home series. Last year, we did like this whole series every week at 6 p.m. We recorded a new educational chat. And one of those chats was an episode on navigation. And I really highly recommend that you guys go and check that out so that you can get a more in-depth knowledge about how to plan your trip. so that you can use terrain as your solution when avalanches are the problem. And so on the next slide, there's plenty of other resources that we can talk about. There's a ton of books that you can read, Staying Alive in Avalanche Terrain, the Avalanche Handbook, Mountaineering, The Freedom of the Hills, Snow Sense. Snow Sense is a good like smaller one if you have an ADHD brain like me, who just doesn't really pay attention to books for longer than 20 minutes at a time. There's plenty of guidebooks that you can check out. Making Turns collection is written by a Weston ambassador, Fritz Berry. Beacon Guidebooks, Mountaineers Publishing. On the web, you can go to avalanche.org to find a lot of awesome resources. I mentioned this before, avtraining.org also has a lot of awesome resources. Particularly, we just launched some videos in partnership with OR about just a bunch of review topics like rescue and identifying avalanche terrain and things like that. I highly recommend using those resources on ARE's website. And then some mapping tools. There's a ton out there like Gaia, Caltopo, Hill Map, Onyx, Mountain Forecast. And then your local Avalanche Center has a ton of resources as well. I wanted to point out Onyx. I've recently started using their tool. They have a app and you can use it online. And they, in certain places, have ski lines right on the map, and they're labeled, and you can tell like they have like zones labeled out too, so that you can get to know an area pretty easily with that. I thought that was really cool, being new to the Winter Park area, and now I feel like I'm an expert at Berthoud Pass already.
Oh, Sarah, I want to jump in really quickly. Speaking of Berthoud Pass, actually, so Beacon Guidebooks makes some really awesome backcountry reference materials. So it's kind of like a guidebook that tells you the different zones, and they do have one for Berthoud Pass, but mostly just centralized in different areas of Colorado and then areas up in the Cascades if you live in the Pacific Northwest. But what's really great about these, and you can do the same thing for other guidebooks as well, but this is a little bit easier with these because they're on a spiral bound. But I stick these into a plastic bag. Like I'll just open up the page that I know I'm going to be writing in that zone. And I'll stick it in a Ziploc bag, and that way it's waterproof. So I can just pull it out and look at it really quickly, and then stick it right back in my bag and know that it's not going to get ruined by the snow. But if it's not on if it's like just from a regular guidebook, just print out the pages that you're going to need and then stick them into your Ziploc bag, and it works just as well.
Yeah, and so what's cool about Beacon Guidebooks and that resource that Ellie just showed us is they have a partnership with the RackUp app. So all of their backcountry resources, you can download the RackUp app, and it allows you to basically carry those resources with you on your phone. Yeah, I definitely recommend checking out. You can check out Weston Backcountry's blogs, as well as all of their past Slay at Home series webinars. Yeah, all right. So now let's kick it back to Sarah Foster.
Awesome, thanks, Sarah Mac. So I'm going to try to kind of breeze through this a little quickly because I don't want to keep you guys over time and make sure we get to your questions. But now, like, you kind of have a very, very base level of like knowledge of how to get into backcountry, gear you need, stuff like that, avalanche courses you need to take. Another key thing is community connections. You want to go out with friends. You want to have a good time in the mountains and not do it alone for both safety and enjoyment factors. So that's a big part. How do you make those connections? There's a ton of, I guess it varies, but there's a ton of community resources out there. There's like backcountry Facebook groups. I just recommend typing in like wherever you are, like Colorado backcountry women or something like that, some sort of combination of those words for whatever region you're in, and hopefully you'll find something there. We've got SheJumps and Weston people here representing, and both those organizations put a lot of events on. Those are great places to meet people with similar interests. Know Before You Go gatherings are good, like the Split Fest, which is one of Weston's events, and others like backcountry focused days at your local resort can be great spots. And then also like free avalanche education. through your local groups and local Abbey Center. A lot of them will do just like a one night, couple hours classroom session. Those are great places too, because obviously everyone there wants to know how to get into the backcountry. So those are good spots to meet people. And when you're meeting people, like you want to find people that you trust, like you're going to be essentially kind of putting your life in their hands, or at least making decisions to stay out of avalanche terrain, for instance, with this person. So things to consider: backcountry education, experience level, desired terrain and objectives. Like, do you guys want to ski the same sort of stuff? Are you setting out at the beginning of the day with the same idea in mind, or are you at completely different like levels of what you think is going to occur that day? That's important. Risk thresholds, and with that, I'll say also someone that you feel comfortable with, like speaking up about your concerns. It's very important. And then athleticism. Is it someone that you're going to be at a somewhat similar pace, or maybe they're not, but like they're okay? Either you're okay going a little slower to stay with them, or vice versa. Those will just make for good partners when you're looking for those. And so, as I mentioned, SheJumps, there's a ton of SheJumps events. We've got level 1, level 2 companion rescues, and also some more like intro to backcountry, but like in the field days. And those right now we have them on the calendar for Oregon, Washington, Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, and I think potentially Idaho too. But this QR code is a great place to start. You can scan it and you'll find all of our events, because we also do virtual events like this one and other in-person events that maybe aren't backcountry focused, but they can still be great spots to meet people. And you can follow us on Instagram, Facebook, all those ways to kind of keep on top of the events that are coming up. And so then I think Ellie can tell you about Weston events. Or no, Sarah Mack. I think you're going to tell us about it.
Yeah, no problem. I think we've already, I drove the point home about the Weston Slay at Home Speaker Series. But we have a lot of other live events, like On Snow demos are back for the 2022 season. We'll have those in Taos, Purgatory, and Telluride. We have also sponsored courses and clinics, including women's specific opportunities like Backcountry 101s, Area 1s and 2s, regional split fest. I think some of the women in the chat said that you were up in Canada. I might be wrong, but there is a Canuck split fest that skiers are also invited to. The Front Range Split Fest, Silverton Split Fest. I'm not sure if they're actually going to run theirs this season or not. Cascadia, Teton, Bozeman, and more. And then we're working on some Colorado meetups. Those are TBA. But definitely check out the events tab on westonbackcountry.com and join the Weston Backcountry Community Facebook page for more details. And then this course is one that I'm super excited about. We actually just launched it today, so it hasn't filled up whatsoever. Women's Weekend in the Wands. It's an all women's and non-binary hut trip designed for all levels. So the big idea here is that it's going to be an awesome experience to build community, develop new skills, learn from other Lady AMGA trained guides, use mindfulness exercises as a risk management tool, as well as a leadership tool, and just generally have a ton of fun skiing and riding powder in the San Juan Mountains of Colorado. I would love to have any of you ladies join me on that course if you're interested. I just dropped the link in the chat. So, are we ready to drop in? We're basically good to send, right? I think we've kind of driven it home. There's plenty of homework for you guys to do, right? Like there's a lot of gear to look at. There's a lot of events to look at, and just overall ways that you can widen your bandwidth by increasing your knowledge, right? And I think that's kind of the take home of this slide.
Awesome. Well, that kind of wraps up our evening. Thank you all so much for tuning in, and huge thanks to other Sarah and Elizabeth, or wow, I'm just saying your names, it like popped up on my screen, Ellie, for being such awesome hosts and sharing their knowledge with you all tonight. At this point, so we've got everyone's contact info. If you have any questions for any of us, feel free to reach out. Ellie and Sarah Mack will be your awesome splitboard source. If you have skiing specific questions, feel free to shoot them my way. Anything else, like get in touch with us. We'd love to chat with you more. At this point, we're gonna head into questions, and before we'll open up the, we'll let you guys, I think you can unmute yourself and just ask questions if you have any. But first, we've had a fair number of questions regarding beacon training parks and how to find them, what they are. So I just kind of wanted to address that first. Basically, they're an area that's set up to have beacons buried, and you can go in a safe, like you're not in avalanche terrain, but you can go with your beacon and practice your beacon skills of just locating where the buried beacons are. And some have just a single beacon, or you can do multiple burial scenarios, but they're just something that's set up for you to practice your beacon skills. And good, if you're trying to find them, there's not like a universal source that I know of, but good spots to check are like your local resort. Sometimes they'll have one. Forest services, like sometimes they'll set one up. Also Abbey centers, like they might not do it themselves, but they'll probably have a really good idea of what's in your area, so they could be a great person or a great resource to reach out to. And on that note, someone also asked about beacons and transceivers, and if 2 antenna transceivers would still work for practice. And in that sense, I would totally say yes. Like we definitely don't recommend them for like using for yourself and on your body, but they make a great practice resource. And I kept my old one from back in the day, and it's what I used to practice. You're still going to be able to pick up the signal. And I don't think anyone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think like we've so moved past those that you're not going to be able to, like, people don't sell them new anymore, but that could be a great spot to look on like your Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, and maybe you could pick up an old one there for practice purposes. And that kind of helps if you're far away from a beacon park and you just want to be practicing your skills at home or in like the mountains right out your door. You can set up your own practice beacon scenarios.
Also along those lines, I think a really good practices that I personally do is every year at the beginning of the season, we may not have a good base set up yet, but I like to go out with my backcountry partner and do a beacon practice, like spend a day doing beacon practices just to refresh my skills. And even though I have some more experience, through several years, it's still something to do every single year just as a refresher. I also like to reread the Staying Alive in Avalanche Terrain book, because it is, your avalanche Bible. And it's very easy if you haven't, been out for half of the year to forget some of those really important things. And you really want to build up the muscle memory when you're doing beacon practice and practicing your rescue skills. So just kind of getting back into the swing of things and having it be almost a second nature, so that when you are in an actual rescue scenario, you're not like bumbling trying to remember what you need to do. But you just go right into it. Oh, and then also, this hasn't been mentioned yet, but I just will touch on it. I am somebody who travels with a dog 100% of the time. I know a lot of outdoor lovers, they're also dog lovers. And so I think it's a good thing to point out that, dogs certainly have their place in the backcountry, but you also want to take into account the kind of terrain that you're going to be in. If it's a very, if you're going to be bringing your dog with you, maybe stick to that very low risk, well, not maybe, but definitely stick to that lower risk avalanche terrain, because really, even though they do sell dog specific beacons, and that can be a great tool to have, and those run on a different frequency than a human beacon for very important purposes. You want to dig out your partner and have yourself dug out before you dig out the dog, even though I would probably want to dig out my dog first. Just kidding. But it's a great tool, but the best tool is really avoidance, not getting into those dangerous scenarios in the first place of having to rescue your partner or your dog in the first place. So again, just even though you love having an adventure partner with you, maybe that's a good opportunity to take your dog to the uphill access at the resorts that Sarah Mack had already mentioned during those off hours. As you know, you just can really easily, through a quick Google search of their rules and regulations, figure out if they are dog friendly. And those are usually on groomed terrain, which is awesome for a dog to be able to run through that really easily versus having to try to run behind you in super deep powder and keep up in potential avalanche terrain.
I feel like there haven't been very many questions.
I know it's been a quiet group. Does anybody have any questions? Feel free to just unmute yourself and throw something out there if you have a question.
I also just want to say that I would absolutely love to connect with you all after this presentation. If anybody ever has any questions about anything, obviously, please reach out to us with our contact information on this slide. And I just want to preface that I'm a good millennial in that I am way better at responding on Instagram than anything else. So please connect with me on Instagram, but I will go out of my way to respond to your email too, if that's your preference.
Yeah, and if you have any questions about the specific gear, especially like the skis and snowboards that we carry, we're happy to answer questions about that. We do also have discount codes if that's something that you're considering purchasing in the near future. We would be happy to save you some bucks and give you a discount code if you just connect with either Sarah or myself.
I'm just dropping mine into the chat right now.
Oh, you're so sneaky.
Awesome. Well, it looks like we don't really have any questions then. So on that note, thank you all so much for coming. And I hope you found this helpful and you're excited to get going on your backcountry goals. And we'll follow up with an email probably tomorrow or so with the recording and a couple other like handy links that we've talked about today. And yeah, thank you all for coming.
Yay, thank you all so much. Have a
Thanks,
wonderful
guys. Have fun out there. Happy winter. Pray for snow.
Yeah.